Senator Chris Coons just delivered a devastating blow that should terrify every American who believes in constitutional limits on presidential power. When he pressed Attorney General Pam Bondi on Trump's authority to summarily execute suspected cartel members without due process, her evasive, non-answer revealed the administration's chilling willingness to abandon the rule of law for extrajudicial killings.
The department cut hundreds of grants totaling hundreds of millions of dollars, many of which serve critical public safety needs, supporting victims, assisting with reentry, violence prevention, including in my own home state. This was literally defunding the police. And I have some concerns about how DOJ is putting at risk public safety by assigning thousands of agents and prosecutors away from drugs, firearms, corruption, violent crime to help ICE arrest people without criminal records. You've indicated a willingness to review any grant that a member of Congress has concerns about, and noted a number of them have been restored on appeal. And I appreciate that willingness to admit some misjudgments or mistakes in some of the many grants that were canceled. But can you assure us this process is going to be fixed going forward so better decisions are made at the start and not just after appeals? And can you assure us that we are not leaving doors wide open for crime and criminality in our communities and over-focusing on arrest and deportation of those without criminal records?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. And as I said earlier, we are reviewing all the grants, and I believe we have, turned some back on for senators who have called. It doesn't matter what state you're from. If it's a law enforcement grant, if it's protecting victims, let us know and we will work with you. And I'm not sure if we have done any in your state yet, but I would be happy to work with you on that. What I can tell you is there have been, out of the 5,800 discretionary grants that were reviewed, only 376 around the country, 7% were terminated. 225 of the grant recipients have appealed that termination. And so far, we've turned back on 18 of those. 17 appeals have been denied, and the rest are being actively reviewed. If any of you know of any of those that you believe should be turned back on, call me. We don't want to jeopardize anything that's hurting. Please do. And Senator, to go to what you said about the FBI and my federal agencies and being pulled to work on immigration cases, they're working hand in hand because we believe that, we have ICE officers out there, as we just discussed. I don't want to repeat that, who are being harmed. We're going to work with them, and I've directed all of my law enforcement agencies to work with ICE to make sure they're safe in Chicago, to make sure they're safe in Memphis, to make sure they're safe right here in Washington, D.C., but also at President Trump's direction. We are not stopping the core function of what we're doing, and that is fighting violent crime, and I think Director Patel made that very clear with all of the arrests that our FBI have been making on violent criminals. And there's so much that we can't talk about here, but if any of you are on the Intel Committee, we are fighting terrorists around this country every single day. Our lawyers are shut down right now. They're not getting paid, but crime is not stopping. They are working around the clock to not only keep our country safe, Senator, but to keep our world safe. And
Madam Attorney General, I think all of us hate that there's a shutdown and its impact on the federal workforce, and are working to find a way out of this shutdown, but one that will also restore cuts to health care. We could spend a lot of time on that, but let's focus on, if I could, two more questions related to your service as the Attorney General. The government's asserting the authority to summarily kill people. It says our cartel members through military strikes against boats on the open ocean in the Caribbean. Congress has never authorized such a use of military force, and it's unclear to me how the administration has concluded that these strikes are legal. I'm concerned with what the limiting principle is, whether the government could summarily kill people. It just declares our cartel members as well as unlawful combatants inside the United States, or if they were American citizens. This isn't about defending cartels, and these aren't hypothetical questions. President Trump assembled military leaders and said they would be needed to fight the enemy from within and to train in cities in the United States that he describes as chaotic and violent. Due process is the cornerstone of our Constitution. I'm deeply concerned about the authority our president seems to be asserting to summarily kill people suspected of criminal activity outside the law. as the chief lawyer for our federal government, you have a unique responsibility to ensure maintenance of our constitutional standards. How did you conclude that these strikes on ships or boats in the open ocean are legal?
Senator Coons, I'm not going to discuss any legal advice that my department may or may not have given or issued at the direction of the president on this matter. Regarding Venezuela, what I can tell you is Maduro is a narco-terrorist, and I announced $50 million reward for his capture to bring him to this country to face charges. He is currently under indictment in our country. Drugs coming from Venezuela are killing our children at record levels.
And
They have
members
been
of this
flowing
committee are
into
as
this
passionate
country.
as you at protecting our families and our communities from fentanyl, but we also need to protect our sailors on the high seas who are conducting freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea from just an abject violation of international norms and standards about how we interdict ships on the high seas. We can push back on fentanyl and drug trafficking. Many of my colleagues have done so as former U.S. attorneys or prosecutors or attorneys general, but we have to do it in a way that is in keeping with the core values of our Constitution. My colleagues have pressed you on a number of recent actions, particularly in the Eastern District of Virginia. My colleague, Senator Klobuchar, did. And I just wanted to add my voice to those who have expressed real alarm at how in your confirmation hearing you said you would be leading a department that would look forward, yet public statements by President Trump urging you to go after and to indict and to prosecute specific named people seem to have led to dramatic and sudden action by the department. I am gravely concerned about what is no longer a hypothetical question, which you refused to answer in your confirmation hearing, but is a real question about when or if the president demands you prosecute individuals because he views them as opponents or enemies, what you will do and what your limiting standard is, because the recent episode around the indictment of James Comey left me very concerned about the direction of the department.
We're a minute and a half over, Senator Chairman. May I answer?
Yes.
Senator Coons, as you have stated in the past, no one is above the law. And James Comey is a pending case right now. It's a pending indictment. He was indicted by one of the most liberal grand juries in the country, by our U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, right here in Virginia. And it's a pending case, so I'm not going to discuss the facts of a pending case.
But you can understand the alarm about the circumstances of the indictment immediately following President Trump demanding that you take action to indict and prosecute that specific individual. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What Senator Coons exposed in that exchange wasn't just evasion, it was a constitutional crisis, hiding in plain sight. When he pressed Bondi on the legal basis for military strikes against suspected cartel members on the open ocean, her refusal to answer revealed something more dangerous than incompetence, a deliberate strategy to operate outside constitutional constraints. Coons framed the core issue with surgical precision. The administration claims authority to summarily kill people. It declares cartel members through military action without congressional authorization and without due process. This isn't theoretical. Trump has explicitly stated military leaders would be needed to fight the enemy from within and train in American cities he calls chaotic. The limiting principle Coons demanded matters because without it, the same logic authorizes extrajudicial execution of American citizens labeled as threats. Bondi's response was textbook deflection. She pivoted to Maduro being a narco-terrorist and drug deaths, never addressing the constitutional question. That evasion is strategic, not accidental. If she acknowledged constitutional limits, she'd have to explain how the administration plans to respect them. If she denied those limits exist, she'd be admitting to authoritarian overreach. So she said nothing substantive. The legal principle at stake is foundational: due process before government execution. The 5th and 14th Amendments guarantee no person shall be deprived of life without due process of law. Military action against suspected criminals outside declared war zones violates this core protection. Historically, even during wartime, the Supreme Court has consistently held that military tribunals cannot substitute for civilian courts where regular judicial processes remain available. The administration's apparent willingness to bypass these protections represents a fundamental departure from constitutional governance that would make every American subject to arbitrary execution based on executive declaration alone. When the chief legal officer of the United States refuses to articulate constitutional limits on killing, we're watching institutional guardrails crumble in real time. Coons also highlighted the pattern of politically motivated prosecutions, particularly the James Comey indictment that followed Trump's public demands. Bondi's claim that grand juries make independent decisions ignores the reality that prosecutors control what evidence juries see and what charges they consider. When those prosecutors take direction from political leadership about specific targets, the independence disappears. The downstream effects are predictable and severe. Career prosecutors who see colleagues targeted for past investigations will self-censor. Intelligence agencies will withhold information they fear could be weaponized. International allies will question intelligence sharing with a department that operates as a political enforcement arm. And citizens will lose faith that law applies equally, regardless of political loyalty. This exchange revealed an administration that views constitutional constraints as obstacles rather than foundations. Coons demanded accountability for a reason. When law enforcement becomes indistinguishable from political warfare, democracy itself becomes the casualty.